My name is Monica Knight. I am the in-home parent trainer for the district. I provide autism parent education, and then with eligibility through an IEP, I do provide either direct parent training or in-home services and parent training. It can be in-home services for your kid and then parent training. Just a little bit about me. I've been with Richardson ISD since 2015. I started my my journey in education back doing early childhood. So that's kind of given me a foundation to build on. And then I started doing special education in 2015. I came into this role in 2020. And so I just really gravitated towards just helping families and helping our students out in the community and just helping them generalize their skills that we teach them at school so they can go out at home in the community.
Was that somewhat a result of COVID?
No, actually, there's a law. Texas has a law that school districts are required to provide autism parent education. And so each district does it a little different. The job opening just came open when we came back and I applied. And so that it was, yeah. So we have always had this position. So tonight, our intended outcomes, what we're going to look at is we're going to define our executive functioning. What does that mean? We are going to understand what typical development is by age. And then we're going to kind of deep dive into the 11 executive functioning skills. And then review some home or caregiver supports for each skill set. What that's going to look like is we're going to deep dive into one skill, and then right after I'm going to give you these skills. Could you do me a favor? The note catchers are on my desk. Is that?
I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
I was just making sure everybody got into the.
Yes, thank you. I made a notes page for y'all if you want to jot down some stuff. She's gonna get it. So let's kind of get our brains going, see where we're at, right? So I want you to pretend that you've been told you're going to go on a work trip. And so there's some index cards on the table and some pens if you guys want to participate. And you guys too online if you just want to kind of think. So in the next 60 seconds, I want you to list mentally or write it down. What type of decisions do you have to make to go on a work trip? How are you going to know what kind of clothes to wear? What do you need to pack in your suitcase? Things like that. Are you going to have to organize transportation? So as you're kind of quickly thinking about all that, you're using the front part of your brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex. And that's where our executive functioning skills come in our brain. Planning, organizing, managing. And so a typical person can multitask and do all those things at the same time. And an adult person can do all that stuff too. So what is executive functioning? So our executive functioning are brain-based skills that every human needs to execute and perform tasks. So just like the little bit of planning you did for your work trip, right? You were using your executive functioning skills to organize what you might need to take on your work trip. You also need these skills. They're necessary to like filter out distractions, prioritize your tasks, set and achieve goals, and control your impulses. These executive functioning skills begin developing at age 2. And now research is saying that it could be fully developed up to the age of 30. So if you have a middle schooler, keep that in mind. Also, our executive functioning skills, they don't just all develop at once. Rather, they develop more in a sequence. And they're almost like they build on top of each other. They can simultaneously develop, but there are definitely some foundational ones that begin developing earlier in age. So just to kind of make a connection, in the brain, the executive functioning kind of focuses as the boss. If you're familiar with an airport, the air traffic controller is the tower that's like managing all of the airplanes, all of the roadways, who's coming down, who's doing this. So that's kind of the executive functioning piece. And then also as a parent, you are most likely the executive functioning of the household, right? You're making all these decisions, you're making all these planning, all these choices. And so it's really making these little decisions, but having a big picture perspective. So first I want to talk about what typical development is for executive functioning, right? Because I feel like executive functioning is like a very broad kind of, it's a popular term nowadays, but if we don't understand what the typical development is, then we can't meet our children where they're at so we can support them. So like I was saying earlier, infancy and toddler age, this is where our executive functioning skills begin. It starts around 6 to 12 months of age, and this is where your infant is going to start developing that emotional control because they're going to recognize familiar people and objects. But by the age of 2, children are showing emotional regulation and basic problem solving skills. Doing a puzzle, or knowing that if you're making a bottle, they're going to get fed. And then also they will begin to express preferences, protest appropriately, and they'll start to understand cause and effect and be able to somewhat regulate their emotions, like with you making the bottle. And then also they'll start having those big reactions to those minor problems. The preschool age 3 to 5, begins developing around 3. That's where your 3-year-olds are going to start learning to keep their hands to themselves, wait their turn, which is working on impulse control, following a group plan. During this age, during preschool age, consistency is going to help develop those organizational skills, such as cleaning up toys, following a schedule. So the more that you are building a routine and having consistency, that structure is going to start building the executive functioning skill of organizing. Elementary school age, 6 to 11. This is where our kids start working on their working memory. They're able to recall information, and they're able to kind of remember maybe where something is at home. Where's your library book, or have you done your homework? Also, planning and organization skills become more refined. Children at this age, this is where they start developing an initiation skill, allowing them to begin tasks independently. That might be as simple as a one-step direction of you saying to go brush your teeth, but it could be as detailed as initiating them doing a writing prompt at school. Middle school and adolescents, 12 and 18. This is where they begin to start developing those critical thinking skills and time management. They begin to kind of process through what multiple perspectives are looking like. Developing goals, managing priorities, what's most important. And then you'll also begin to see demonstration of improved skills such as self-regulation and that task initiation. And then I have young adulthood here. This is where we're going to refine that working memory, cognitive flexibility, but also remember, we're still working on our executive functioning even after 18. young adults are going to start to exhibit strong impulse control and emotional regulation. But this might be things that we need to continue to work on till we're 25, 30 years old. So now I'd like to kind of dive into the 11 skills of executive functioning. As we're listening through these skills, think about some of the things that your kid is really good at, and then think about some of the things that your kid might struggle with. That might be something to kind of hone in. If you find one thing that you're really kind of thinking about, jot down notes about that one skill, and then you could work on that. The webinar good. So the 11 skills that we're going to talk about today are planning, time management, task initiation, which is the amount of time that it takes to start something, organization, problem solving, mental or cognitive flexibility, working memory, emotional control, impulse control, attentional control, and self-monitoring. Those are written down on your notes picture too. So the first one is planning. So planning is developing a well thought out strategy before starting a task. So that was what you were doing when you were figuring out what you were going to take on your work trip. But for our students at school or our little ones, it might be filling out a graphic organizer before writing an essay, taking an extra few minutes to think about what needs to be done today. Like, is it Monday? Do I have ballet? Do I need to get my ballet clothes together? Writing down homework in an agenda before you leave class. That's something that's planning. Also planning out times for events and activities that don't overlap, and figuring out what to wear to school. That is a good one to kind of start out with, what to wear to school. And shoes, yes. And if you do it the night before, even better. So how can you help your child kind of build planning skills? So first and foremost, any of these skills that we're going to go over, routines, establishing routines and schedules. Whether we're talking about executive functioning, communication, or behavior, the first foundational skill for you is going to be establishing routines. Also using visual tools for planning. It could be a visual schedule, a calendar, a checklist. For your older kids, it could be a planner. And then also creating a designated space for varied tasks. It could be homework tasks. It could also be a calm down area. Just establishing that designated space. And then also consider task demands, like how much time and how much attention is something going to take. If you know something's going to take a little bit longer, establish that skill support to give your kid that extra time to kind of process that. And then also consider necessary materials and preparation. Having a basket at your door with all the school supplies before you walk out the door is good for planning. And then breaking down things into smaller tasks. It could be a homework assignment, but it could also be getting ready in the morning, using a visual schedule of getting ready. First, I'm going to put my socks on, then I'm going to put my shoes on. And so that's a small example of breaking down like a functional routine. Also, those academic tasks, yes, we want to break those down too. The next skill is time management. This is going to be a broad set of skills related to time and using time effectively. And so understanding time concepts, minute, hour, that's going to kind of build foundationally early in those elementary years. Your kid might start understanding what yesterday or tomorrow is. But keep in mind, if we're working with our kiddos that may have a little bit of a deficit, we're gonna wanna meet our kids where they are, right? And so when we're working with time management, accurately knowing how much time it takes to complete a task and completing a task in the allotted amount of time. And then also following a timeline to finish chores or homework, arriving on time for appointments, avoiding procrastination or putting tasks off till the last minute. And this is going to be kind of like a timeline that I'm giving you. Some of the definitions are going to be for younger kids. Some of them are going to be for middle school. Some of them are going to be for older kids. So how can you support your kid with time management skills? Creating a daily checklist, that visual schedule to build routine. Here we are back to that routine and those visual schedules. A home calendar with important events. I can't recommend just having like a big calendar in your kitchen or living area that everyone can see how valuable that is. Also discussing with them, hey, we have this tomorrow, so we need to wake up a little bit early so we can do that. Having those conversations. Reducing and giving limits for social media and TV time. Practice making to-do lists together and ordering items by importance. That's a really good one, especially giving our kids this practice time, right? We want them to be able to practice things with us at our house so that when they get out into the real world, they can do it. Also, like I said, modeling and discussing, and then using a timer for work sessions. And using a timer might not necessarily be say, hey, I want you to get your homework done in this amount of time. It might look like, hey, work for 10 minutes, then you get a break, and then you come back and you work for another 10 minutes and you finish your assignment. And so those timers are not necessarily to say, get everything done in this amount of time. The next skill is task initiation. And this is like an individual's ability to initiate and independently start a task. And so you might hear this as a word called latency, which is beginning a task. And so ideally, if you can begin a task within 3 seconds of instruction, that's going to be typical development, right? But we want to meet our kids where they are. Do I need to go to my child and touch my child, look my child in the eye to get their attention, and then give them the direction, right? Then do I need to add on some processing time because they may have a processing delay? Do I need to show them a picture of what I've asked them to do? So understanding your child's level of communication and cognitive ability is baseline for all of these skills. Does your child complete familiar daily routines without needing instruction? Do they respond to a countdown timer to begin a task? That's also a good one too. You can use the timer for that. Turn the timer on and say, I want you to start the task before the timer goes off. That's a good one too. I'm already giving you the support skills, sorry. So how can you support your kid in task initiation? Once again, creating that schedule and routine. If they know what's expected, that's going to be a foundational skill for them to do any. Using those visual timers, working in short bursts, which is going to be breaking down something into shorter chunks. Exercising and playing before you ask your kid to do like something tedious activates the brain. And so that's also going to give them a calming effect if they need to sit down and complete something. Providing incentives after a set of tasks is completed. I liked this one for the little ones, practicing the rocket ship countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. Let's go brush our teeth. Making things fun too and adding playful stuff into what we're doing, our daily routines, that's gonna also help with task initiation. And then do challenging tasks together. Our kiddos on the spectrum, oftentimes they need something which is called body doubling. And so for example, if your kid's bedroom is a mess and you just say, go clean your room. Well, that can mean a lot of things. Do I pick up the Legos first? Do I try to put my laundry in the basket first? Oh no, I'm frozen and now I just look like I'm not listening to you. So going in there and saying, hey, let's put all of our clothes in the basket, and then you actually doing the task and doing that. You're not doing the whole thing, right? You guys are kind of doing it together. But that body doubling is a very good support. And you might have to do that with homework, brushing teeth, things like that too. The next skill is organization. While organization, it can mean a lot of different things. Mainly we want our kiddos to like keep their belongings where they're supposed to go, keep things tidy. And that's really kind of a critical executive functioning skill, knowing where your things are. After I brush my teeth, I'm going to put the toothpaste cap back on, and I'm going to put my toothbrush back into the holder. And so ordering items or pictures into order, we want our kids to work on, be able to organize a story, beginning, middle, and end. That's something they work on at school, but that's something you can work on at home too. Organization means returning our items back to where they go, cleaning up at the end of an activity, maintaining our space, keeping our homework and our essential documents together. The middle school kids might have a binder or different folders for each subject, supporting them to know science goes in the green, reading goes in the red, stuff like that. Developing an outline and listing organizing tasks. So you can see that organization is a very broad skill and means a lot of different things. So how can you help your kiddo at home with organization? Using that visual schedule and routine. And that's going to help them to know what that expected behavior is. When you've got those schedules and those routines, they know what's coming next. Using a morning or afternoon checklist to remind your child or a visual schedule. I like this one, play where does it go? Kind of gather materials and then have your kid put them back. And then that lets you know they know where the spot is. Also creating a designated spot just for homework and having a routine built in on how you start homework. You might have a desk at home for homework, but if your kid is struggling with some task initiation, they might not realize, I need to get my folder out of my backpack. I need to get all my materials together. I might need a snack before I start my homework. So there's a lot of little things before Johnny's going to sit down and start his homework. Also, a good thing is labeling places in your home. It's good for reading, but it's also good for organization. For example, on the dresser, if you have shirts and socks, that could be something that your child could even help you start organizing the laundry and build functional skills for adulthood. Problem solving is the next one. So this involves our capacity to identify and describe a problem, but also generate a solution to fix it. This is a multi-step executive functioning skill. This means that we're going to identify and define a problem, but we're also going to include where the problem originated. We could be able to break apart a problem into smaller parts, identify and understand problems in different social contexts, including school, home, friends, sorting out a conflict, and knowing when and how to seek guidance from others, persisting and developing new strategies when previous attempts fails. This is going to be a skill that will begin to develop in middle school or late elementary, but this is going to be something that we want to continue to work with our kids and even maybe have a strategy that we want to teach our kids. And so I have a specific strategy that I want to show you guys. It's called the ideal problem-solving solution. And so first, we want to teach our kid how to identify a problem. Second, we want to help our child describe the outcome that we want, but also describe maybe the outcome that we got. Also, explore possibilities for strategies, anticipate outcomes and acts, and then we want to reflect. We want to look, we want to learn. And so this is going to be a multi-layered problem-solving skill support that you could start early on and then just gradually build. But if you had something happen, you could write this out and you can talk through each of the steps with your kid. Some other ways to build problem-solving skills, puzzles, games. This activates the part of the brain where we have to think, we have to organize and kind of process through, what do I need to do? Just think about like a Rubik's Cube or Uno, figuring out which color, which number, do I have enough cards? Mental math is also a good thing to support problem-solving skills. Another thing that's really good is just modeling your own problem solving in real time. I just recently read some research where at the end of the day, parents who kind of went through their day and told their kid, hey, you know, I had something frustrating happen today, and this is what I did. And then the kids are like taking on part of this knowledge and gaining some of those problem solving skills as you're talking through it, kind of real time at the end of the day. And that's you narrating your thinking, demonstrating, asking for help when needed, engaging them in decisions when appropriate. And so also just modeling the behavior that you want, you know, you could be cooking and you might not have baking soda or you might not have something. And then you have to go online and maybe look how to formulate something else or something. Just talking through those real things throughout your day, those are going to build problem solving skills for your kids. The next skill that I want to talk to you about is mental flexibility. This is a tricky one, especially with our kiddos on the spectrum, right? And so the typical mental flexibilities that we're going to transition between activities, including ending a preferred activity and moving on to a non-preferred activity. Also recognizing like a problem or a glitch and kind of adjusting our behavior, like if our schedule changes. That's one that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. Or trying something new. After the first time I tried it, it was really hard, so now I don't want to do it again. Accepting another one's idea or view, revising communication or rephrasing when a listener doesn't understand, adapting when plans change or when unexpected events occur. I think this in general is something that all of our kiddos struggle with, right? And this is something that we have to come in as parents and we have to be that home base, that executive functioning for them to come in and kind of teach them those skills, but also be their support system when needed. So how can you help your kid with mental flexibility? First and foremost, controlling your own emotional response is going to be the best thing. And then modeling the correct behavior. Also, though, I have this feelings chart on the side. If you begin at a younger age supporting your child with labeling and understanding their emotions, that's going to build some mental flexibility after the meltdown or the unflexibility has occurred, right? Because then you're able to problem solve and kind of talk through. But using social stories to build knowledge of correct behavior. And social stories are not just any type of stories. It's an evidence-based research of what a social story is. And if you're not quite sure what that is, I encourage you to look up what a social story is. And if you need any of them, they're easy to find online, but they have a very specific way that it's written and the way that it's presented for our kiddos on the spectrum. Also using these visuals to build emotional knowledge, labeling. And then there's something called the first then. And so that's to help support with transitions. Giving them just a short directions. First, we're going to brush our teeth, then we're going to get dressed, right? I'm not giving them this big elaborate morning routine that we're working on. I'm breaking it down into smaller tasks, but also the first then is an evidence-based strategy for our kiddos too. And then categorizing objects. And so we talked about grabbing some things from the house earlier. You could categorize objects in your house, but also sorting items by color and shape and just kind of changing things. And then practicing and rehearsing when the environment is calm. That's the best thing when to teach these skills. We don't want to present a new skill or a new support in the middle of the unflexibility time, because your child is not in the part of their brain when they can accept new information. The next one is working memory. Working memory includes our ability to remember and recall information, such as numbers, letters, words. Also delivering a message to another person, completing simple errands, or one-step or two-step tasks, playing memory games, matching, completing those math facts, keeping track of your belongings, remembering where things are. If you have a middle schooler, this might be something that you guys are working on, which is the working memory right now. So how can you help your child with working memory skills? Making those lists. You can make it at first, but then I would encourage your child to make those lists too. But also making those meaningful connections of why do I need to make this list? Why do I need to know where my stuff is? Chunking the information. If you maybe need to have a list in the bathroom, or you need to have a list at the homework desk, multiple lists to chunk. Using mnemonic devices and acronyms. A lot of times in math class, they use a lot of acronyms. And so just academically, if your child is doing math and they have an acronym that they need to recall, like multiplication, making sure that your child has that with them while they're doing their homework and provide. Did something happen at school? Trying to figure out what the foundation is. Teach your child to label their emotions, discuss big and small problems, and what the expected behavior is. Oh, okay. Do I need to unmute me then? Oh, okay. Thank you. And so what I mean by that is, okay, I can't find my shoe, right? So that's a small problem. So let's discuss about, well, it might be a small problem for some people, but let's discuss about what's the expected response for me to not find my shoe. Do I have another pair? Can I look? But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna call 911 and I'm gonna have a big ordeal, right? But if, for instance, there is something that is of larger magnitude, then let's discuss that also. You know, let's discuss if there is a fire, what do I need to do? Let's have a plan, right? And so that's what I mean by discussing things. Also, some daily physical activity. If I could just tell you one thing, the research behind the exercise and the brain and the emotional control and our kiddos on the spectrum is just phenomenal of just activating the brain and just keeping the emotions regulated. I could do a whole nother training just on exercise. And then also keeping an environment that promotes open dialogue and then narrating those real life situations and triggers yourself. And you can see that a lot of these skills kind of overlap. So when I talked about earlier that it's kind of a continuum, that these skills kind of build on each other, you're not really going to be working on one skill at a time, but kind of dipping into all of them and foundationally building. The next one is impulse control. Impulse control involves the ability to think before we act, how we pause, think, and control our behaviors. That could look like taking turns in conversation, allowing others to talk or share, allowing someone else to share what they like. Sometimes our kiddos will get on their own subject of trains or puzzles or something. And so we want to support them in allowing others to kind of interject in the conversation too. Practicing shared preference items, responding to healthy limits on food. Impulse control could look like resisting peer pressure to our older ones, refraining from talking back, negotiating, asking before leaving the house is impulse control, and also asking for a snack is impulse control. So how can you support your kid with impulse control? Once again, I want you to evaluate and meet your child where they are. What cognitive level do they have of impulse control? What cognitive level do they have of emotional control? Using visuals. If your child is constantly getting snacks and you want them to ask, putting a visual of a stop sign on the pantry is a good idea. Or if your child leaves and elopes, you can put a stop sign on the front door to remind them not to leave. Also using the first and then. Practicing and rehearsing these behaviors during a calm time. Reviewing game rules and social rules. If you're about to play like family game night with Uno, reviewing the games, like, okay, each person's gonna have a turn, each person is gonna do this, like that can go a long way. Also, if you're about to go into the grocery store, reminding them, hey, whatever mom says goes in, or stay close, giving them those repetition, reminding them before you go in, it's a good idea too. Modeling the behavior you want to see, and then also promoting good sleep and healthy habits. Sleep is a very interesting thing, and it gives our brains time to reset and reboot. And if we don't have good sleep, we definitely can't control our impulse or emotions. So the last skill is like attentional control and self-monitoring. This is one of the higher level executive functioning skills. What it looks like when you're younger might be sitting and listening to a story, right? We're not going to expect a 6-year-old to sit on the carpet for 30 minutes and listen to the whole story.
but we are gonna expect our 11th grader to be able to sit for 30 minutes or 20 minutes and work on a group project or something like that. It might also look like playing a game for a set amount of age-appropriate time, working with a partner, taking turns to listen, giving your full attention, whole body listening, is something that is self-monitoring and attention. Resisting the impulse to check your social media or your email during homework session. That's a hard one sometimes. And that goes back to that impulse control, right? And then following a complex recipe by focusing on each step without getting distracted. That is a high level functioning skill. So how can you support your kiddo with this? First off, if you have a complex task or activity that you're going to do, take those frequent breaks, build in those frequent breaks, plan that physical activity, break those tasks into smaller parts. Also use those self-timers and using checklist or to-do list for like kind of priorities. And then also using a check-in and check-out method. If your child has like a big project, and you've got something due in the next couple of weeks, okay, well, I'm gonna check in on Wednesday, and then I'm gonna check in on Monday and kind of make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. And then also kind of teaching that self-talk, that self kind of like, okay, have I done this? What have I done? What do I need to do? We often have that internal dialogue, and that's just such a good thing to kind of process through. So I did want to show you like some real life generalizations. So a generalization is something that we learn in one environment, and then we're able to do it in another environment. So for school speaking, your child might be learning skills in speech in a small group environment, and then they're going into the classroom, which is a larger environment, and then they're doing those same skills. And then we're asking our kids to take that knowledge and skills and go out into the world and go home and do that stuff and go into the community and do those things. So you can see the level of foundational skills that we want to build and how it kind of goes out into the world. So an effective generalization, let's say of homework. Your child can use a checklist to complete homework for math. So now they can create a checklist for reading, right? But the faulty generalization of that is your child like, well, I don't know how to do math, so I can't do any homework. And that might be something that you hear. And so something to kind of combat that is like, hey buddy, I saw you complete that checklist for math. I saw you do that math work. Let's do it together. Let's do that body doubling, right? But building up that confidence so we're not getting that faulty generalization. Another example is your child is taught to kind of label their triggers emotionally. And so then when a trigger occurs later that day, they can tell you. They could say, like if they're in speech and they're talking about maybe some social conflicts, and then something happens at school and they can talk to a friend about it. Sometimes at the high school levels, they have some peer conflict groups that the kids might have, or the kids come home and they tell you, hey, this is what happened and this is why I got upset. But a faulty generalization of that is that a social gathering triggers their anxiety from the past. So now they're not going to go to any social things. And so once again, building that confidence and saying, hey, I know that you're able to kind of understand and label those emotions. So let's problem solve and work through this so we can venture out into those social things again.
I think one tweak on this one.
Okay,
Will you guys sign in before you, speak up? There's a sign in right there.
thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
And so I just wanted to give you guys these examples of kind of what it looks like. Because your kids are doing a lot of good work at school and they can do so much. And it's like they're doing all this hard work at school and I know that they can do it with y'all too. This is going to be the last slide of our presentation. I just want to show you guys the feedback QR code, but thank you so much for coming to our training tonight. I'm going to put up a QR code for some feedback. It has an option for if you have any questions, and it will come straight to my email. If you have any questions, I'm happy to help you out with anything or connect you with your child's case manager or campus team. Don't be afraid to ask any questions, and I'll leave that up. Yes, if you would like access to the presentation, please fill out the QR code and I will send it to everyone who fills out the QR code. Or if you signed up to the RSVP, I will also email it to those emails too. Thank you.